You know, when you hear the name Alexander the Great, you probably picture a legendary warrior on horseback, sword in hand, just conquering the entire world. And look, you're not wrong, but that's only half the story. His life was one of just staggering ambition, but his true legacy, it might not be what you think. So, this is really the core of it all. What actually made Alexander so great? Was it the absolutely massive empire he carved out, or was it the cultural firestorm he unknowingly kicked off? For a long, long time, this has been the main image of Alexander, a military prodigy who, in a little over a decade, created one of the biggest empires the world had ever seen. But to really get how he did it, we first have to take a look at the world he was born into. Right, so before Alexander could have his moment, the old powers, well, they had to be weakened. His story doesn't just start out of nowhere. It begins in a Greece that was exhausted and really, really divided. This timeline, man, it tells the whole story. You see, the Greek city-states first band together to fight off the massive Persian Empire, a huge win for them. But then what happens? They immediately turn on each other. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta just completely tore the Greek world apart, leaving it drained and wide open for a new power to step in. And just to the north of all this chaos, you've got the Macedonians. Now, they saw themselves as Greek. They worshipped the same gods, they spoke a dialect of Greek, but to the big-shot city-states like Athens, they were kind of rough, outsiders. The Greeks called them barbarians, which didn't necessarily mean savages, but more like people who didn't speak Greek the right way. This was a huge miscalculation on their part. So seeing his chance, King Philip II of Macedonia just swept down and did what the Greeks couldn't do themselves. He unified them by conquering them. He was a brilliant general, a brilliant diplomat, but he wouldn't live to see his ultimate plans play out. He was assassinated, leaving his incredible ambitions and a powerful army to his son, who was just 20 years old, Alexander. And this is where the story just explodes. Philip is gone. In his place is a 20-year-old kid who just inherited not only a throne, but a battle-hardened army and a plan to conquer the known world. This quote gives us a direct peek into Alexander's mind. His father, Philip, gave him the army, sure, but he also gave him Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the age, as his personal tutor. And this is so important. It means the man marching across Asia wasn't just a warrior. He was a student of philosophy, of science, with a copy of the Iliad in his bag. He wasn't just conquering lands, he was carrying Greek culture with him. So Alexander's campaign kicks off with a pretty ruthless message. He completely crushes a rebellion in the city of Thebes to make sure Greece stays in line. Then he crosses into Asia Minor, launching the huge invasion his father had dreamed of. You can see him here sweeping down the coast and into Egypt, where the Egyptians, who were sick of Persian rule, actually welcomed him as a liberator. This right here, this quote, gets to the heart of his military genius. Alexander's army was often outnumbered, but his leadership, his insane tactics, and just the sheer speed of his movements consistently overwhelmed his enemies. He literally led from the front, and his men were fiercely loyal because of it. Okay, so this is the big one. The moment of truth came in 331 BCE. At the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander went up against the full might of the Persian army, led by King Darius III. Even though he was massively outnumbered, his strategy was just better. Darius fled, the Persian Empire pretty much collapsed, and Alexander marched into Babylon as its new king.
But he wasn't done, not even close. For Alexander, it wasn't enough to rule the biggest empire on earth. He wanted to reach what he called the ends of the earth. So he pushed his army even further east, over the Hindu Kush Mountains and into the Indus River Valley, fighting these brutal campaigns in modern-day Pakistan and India.
He had conquered more of the known world than anyone in history. But here's the thing about an empire built on the will of just one person. It's incredibly fragile. And the turning point was about to come, not from an enemy army, but from inside his own ranks. So what finally stopped the world's greatest conqueror? It wasn't another king. It was his own men. After more than a decade of nonstop war, his army just hit its breaking point. In India, they basically mutinied. They were thousands of miles from home, and they simply refused to go one step further. For the first time, Alexander's ambition had a limit, and he had no choice but to turn back. He made it back to Babylon and started making plans to actually govern this massive new kingdom of his. But he never got the chance. He got sick with a fever and died, just like that.
He was only 32 years old.
And the result was immediate chaos. Alexander died without naming an heir, and so the empire he'd built in just 13 years was torn apart by his own generals. They carved it up into these warring kingdoms, just like you see here. The physical empire, his great political creation, was gone in a flash.
So if his empire just shattered like that, we have to go back to our original question. What was his real legacy? Well, the answer is an idea, a cultural fusion that would change the world forever. The answer is in one word: Hellenism. As Alexander's armies marched across the world, they were like cultural transmitters. They brought the Greek language, Greek art, Greek philosophy with them. But it wasn't a simple replacement of one culture with another. It was a fusion. It was a remix. Greek ideas started blending with the ancient, complex cultures of Egypt, Persia, and India, creating this vibrant new mix the world had never seen before. And there is no better example of this than the city he founded in Egypt, Alexandria. I mean, he named dozens of cities after himself, but this one became the shining capital of this new Hellenistic world. It was a huge center for trade, sure, but way more important, for knowledge. Its legendary library and museum became a melting pot where scholars from all over the world could preserve and build on the collective wisdom of Greece, Egypt, and the East.
So, in the end, Alexander the Conqueror is only half the story. His real, lasting legacy was actually unintentional. It was the Hellenistic culture that was sparked by his conquests. This cultural blend created a common language and a shared set of ideas across the ancient world, which laid the intellectual groundwork for the rise of the Roman Empire and, by extension, really shaped the course of Western civilization itself. It leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. His empire was temporary, but the cultural connections he accidentally created have echoed through thousands of years. It really makes you wonder how the threads of our own world might trace all the way back to that one breathtaking ambition to unite the world under a single rule.